Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Skipped it yesterday. Hope you don't mind. Took Christmas Day off and decided to let everybody have a little time with the families. No need for a 20-minute Morning Pitt. No need for me to record a 20-minute Morning Pitt. You guys can just you can make do for one day. I assume didn't get your week started with a Morning Pitt, but we did put a bunch of recruit videos. We put them all in one place on the front page at Panther-Lair.com. But it's time now to move on with the week. It's Tuesday. It's the day after Christmas. So what did this holiday season bring for your Pitt football Panthers? Let's run it down and just kind of recap some of the big additions and big retentions over the course of this month so far on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Tuesday. It's the day after Christmas. I hope you had a great holiday. Hope you enjoyed it, safe and happy with friends and family and all the things. Hopefully you were able to do all the things you wanted to do. I wanted to lay around and relax yesterday. Got a little bit of time to do that, and hopefully you were able to do, like I say, whatever you were inclined to do on the holiday. I hope it was a good one and a happy one. Of course, you know the deal here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. As we move back into the week, we're releasing these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, or in the case of this week, Tuesday through Friday. We do our weekly live show every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. I think I'm moving the time officially. I think we're officially making it an 8 to 9 podcast as opposed to 8:30 to 9:30. I just like starting at 8. It feels a little more comfortable. We can... I like getting done at 9 o'clock as opposed to 9:30, and you guys have been tuning in, so we appreciate that as well. So 8 o'clock on Wednesday nights. Tomorrow night we'll have a live stream right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Jim Hammett and I will get together for a little Pitt sports talk, and you can join that as well with your comments and questions. There's a chat screen up here on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can type your comments and questions in there, and it's a little bit of back and forth. It's like a talk show, or it's more of like a call-in show almost. So these Morning Pits are like a talk show where I just talk for 20 minutes. The live stream is like a call-in show. You can't call. We're not going to hear your voice, but I could do a voice when I read your comments. If you want me to use a special funny voice, we can always work on that. I got a great falsetto that I could drop. But we do that. We're going to have some post-game shows. I'm tentatively planning to do a post-game show after the Pitt-Syracuse game this Saturday. Panthers dive headlong into ACC play on Saturday afternoon. It's a noon game at Syracuse. So I think once that game wraps up, we'll give a few minutes to do some post-game coverage, get that stuff online at Panther-Lair.com, and then we will have a post-game show, a live post-game show. Again, another live stream that you can be a part of with your comments and questions. So you won't want to miss that. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you can be a part of it and make sure you don't miss any of it by clicking the subscribe button. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You'll get notifications sent to your phone, alerts if you want them, so you know every time we post a new video or go live for anything. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We'll have a lot of coverage for you there. Just because signing day is over, doesn't mean we're going to stop covering things. There's always something to write about, and we'll have plenty to write about as we move forward here through the football offseason and the basketball regular season. Like I say, Panthers diving into full-time ACC play here starting on Saturday. So we'll have a lot to talk about in that regard. Spent a lot of time this weekend, though, thinking about really what the month of December brought for Pitt, whether it was in a coaching change, in the transfer portal, or in the recruiting front. I think the last few weeks were, I would say, a net positive for the Panthers, for the Pitt football program, for Pat Narduzzi and his group. I would say it was a net positive over the course of this month. And you start with the change at offensive coordinator. And I think I would be hard-pressed to find anyone who would say that the change was not needed or that it wasn't time for a change. I think you look at the production of the offense over the last 2 seasons, and it wasn't good enough. I think you can look at multiple games, at least 2 in 2022, that the offense lost. I mean, the offense was the sole reason or the primary reason for the loss. And I mean, this past season, like, how many can you count where the offense truly had an opportunity where they probably could have won the game with just a competent offense, with just a mildly effective offense, but because they were just downright horrid for large stretches of these games, they turned into losses. I think West Virginia is a game that you would look at and say that. I think Wake Forest is a game that you would look at and say that about it. I think Syracuse is certainly a game that you would say that about it. And I think Duke to a large extent. How many did I just name? West Virginia, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Duke. Even just if we take West Virginia, Wake Forest, Syracuse, which I think are the three most egregious losses of the 2023 season, that if you flip those, which I think mildly effective offense, moderately effective offense wins those games. Now it's 6-6 and they're going to a bowl game. And that's without even getting into the Cincinnati game, the Virginia Tech game, or the Duke game. All games where I think slightly more effective offense could have won. And you could look at each of those games and say, well, the defense got gashed in the first half by the run against Cincinnati. They couldn't stop Virginia Tech's offense, and the Duke game, okay. But I think there's something to be said for Pitt's offense not staying on the field longer, keeping the defense on the sideline, keeping Virginia Tech's offense on the sideline, or Cincinnati's offense on the sideline, and potentially, could have had a chance to win one or two or all three of those games. And now you're looking at 7, 8, or 9 wins. And just because the offense was bad, and that's without even getting into the Florida State game, a game where, again, it's there for you. You've got an opportunity to win it. You've got an opportunity to be competitive, but their offense was just so bad. Long way of saying something that we all know, and we've all known, and we watched it happen, and we said it a lot as it was happening. These were all games that could have been won, but they were lost by the offense, and so a change was needed. And they went out, Pat Narduzzi went out and got someone in Cade Bell who, again, to rehash what we said a lot when this hire was made, if nothing else, he represents a marked departure from what Pat Narduzzi has done thus far. I mean, and his coordinators have not all been the same. His offensive coordinators, there was a big difference between Jim Chaney and Sean Watson, or Jim Chaney and Matt Canada, a big difference between Matt Canada and Sean Watson, a big difference between Watson and Mark Whipple, a big difference between Whipple and Frank Signetti. And some of those hires were better than others, but you can't say that they were all the same guy. He didn't hire 5 different versions of the same coach. There were very considerable differences there. Maybe the biggest overlap, maybe you would say, between Watson and Signetti. But for the most part, I mean, they were all very different. And in Cade Bell, Narduzzi has gone a whole new level. You know what I mean? And gone in a completely different direction from anything he's done over the past 5 hires that he's made at offensive coordinator. Bell put up huge numbers at Western Carolina and had a history, and has been really successful in doing so. And nobody, I think, that he hired really had that kind of production on their resume, sort of consistently over the course of a couple of years, like Cade Bell had at Western Carolina. He's also a lot younger than anybody that Narduzzi has hired, and I don't think that's unimportant either. He has tended to hire veteran coaches. This is the common link among all 5 offensive coordinators, is that they were all older, more experienced coaches. I mean, differing ages. Matt Canada was younger than Mark Whipple for sure. But they all had a lot of experience, more experience, and more age than Cade Bell has. And so, as a departure, and I think, you don't know, and I don't know how this offense that was so successful in FCS is going to translate to playing not just FBS, but ACC football, Power 5 football. We don't know. We don't know how it's going to translate. We'll wait and see. And maybe it'll be a personnel fit. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But if nothing else, the one thing we can judge it on right now is that Pat Narduzzi, I think you can look at this hire and say that he evaluated the situation, identified a major issue, and looked to try to fix it. And in trying to fix it, he went for a coach who was very different from anyone he has hired before, and a coach who would seem like he's got a very different philosophy from what Narduzzi himself has professed. And so we'll wait and see how it works out. But I think you got to give credit for thinking outside the box, departing from his standard hires and trying something different in order to fix the offense and give this team and program a better chance to succeed. So that was a pretty nice gift, I think, under the Christmas tree for Pitt football. Just the change in approach, if nothing else. If we don't want to say that Cade Bell is a surefire home run hire, and that's fair, we don't know. I think the change in approach is a that was a good step for Pat Narduzzi. It was a good step. Then, of course, you move forward to the transfer portal, and not just the guys that Pitt got, but the guys that they lost and didn't lose. And I think there are a few things when you look at who went into the transfer portal this offseason and who didn't go into the transfer portal, that you can find a lot of positive storylines for Pitt there as well. For starters, they didn't really lose much. They really didn't. I mean, the biggest losses, I think DeAndre Jules, Sam Okunlola, and for me at least, Bengali Kamara. maybe not for you, maybe not even for the coaches, maybe not for the program, I don't know. But for me, it hurt to see him go. Bub Mead's going to the NFL as well. But when we talk about, so those are, both of the hype trains I was really driving this summer and this offseason. They're both gone. But when you talk about the transfer portal, that's really those are the three big losses, right? Is Jules, Okunlola, Kamara, and that's those are tough losses. But I think when you then measure them against the return of players like Gavin Bartholomew, Dayon Hayes, Rodney Hammond, Kenny Johnson, Ryan Baer, Branson Taylor, those are maybe the main six, I think. Solomon DeShields, actually, you throw him in there as well. Those are kind of the main seven that I think were among the most important players for Pitt to hold on to this offseason, and players that they did hold on to this offseason. There's a lot that goes into it, and we've talked about this on a lot of different levels. We don't need to go too far down this path of how this kind of comes to pass of guys you keep and guys you lose and where they go and all that kind of stuff. But it's a credit to kind of a large operation and a lot of people, I think, to hold on to those guys. At midseason, I think most people assumed that Bartholomew and Johnson at a minimum would be gone, possibly Hammond as well. All to the transfer portal, and maybe Taylor and Baer. The fact that all of those guys are coming back, I think, is really huge. I think it's big for Pitt on the field, and I think it's big as a statement from Pitt and the people working on Pitt's behalf that they were able to keep these guys here. Make no mistake about it. They had opportunities to go elsewhere. I think every one of those seven guys I just talked about had opportunities to go elsewhere. And in some cases, they were very aggressive opportunities. Now, I know, I think we talked during the mailbag on Friday about, well, how does this actually go down? Who talks to who? And it's never, coach at school A calling player B and talking to him. It's, several layers removed, several levels removed, or, and several layers of separation between the coach and who's actually doing the talking and the player and who's actually doing the talking. But I think there were very aggressive offers communicated to these players, and they had opportunities to go elsewhere, to big schools, Power 5 schools, for good opportunities. And they ultimately turned them down and returned to Pitt. And that, to some extent, that's a testament of some of the work that was done behind the scenes on Pitt's behalf. I think it's a little bit of a sign that maybe this is not the sinking ship some fans might have believed it to be in the midst of, at the conclusion of a 3-9 season. But ultimately, I think it's a net positive. Not a net positive, it's a positive. There's no negatives to bringing these guys back, and it helps Pitt. I think it makes Pitt better on the field for next season than if they, better than they would have been if they didn't have those guys. And then I think it, like I say, it's sort of a testament to those efforts overall to be able to retain them. And so I think that's huge as well. Of course, then with what Pitt got out of the transfer portal, full disclosure, we're recording this, a little bit in advance. So if anything's changed between now and the time we release the video, you'll understand. You'll forgive me. But 9 guys that we know of out of the transfer portal. I've talked about it a lot. Restocking the lines. 3 defensive linemen in this transfer portal class with David Ojebwe and Nate Matlack, the defensive ends from Clemson and Kansas State, respectively. And then Nick James, the defensive tackle from Indiana, plus Lyndon Cooper, the offensive lineman from NC State. And really, that's where the transfer class dovetails with the recruiting class, because we saw a huge effort in the recruiting front as well, signing 10 linemen. So 10 linemen coming out of the high school ranks, plus 4 more linemen coming out of the transfer portal. You have 14 additions just to the line of scrimmage. this offseason. With 10 coming out of high school what was the breakdown? 8 defensive linemen and 6 offensive linemen. I mean, that's huge. That's 8 and 6, 14 total. Right. I had to double check my math there. Something didn't sound like it added up right. They needed to restock the lines, both for 2024 and beyond, and I think they did that. And I think it's pretty remarkable how well they did that. And I talked a lot about this on signing day and the next couple of days after that. I think it's one of the biggest storylines to come out of signing day is how they restocked the lines, both out of the recruiting class and the transfer portal. But I think it bears repeating. If we're going to talk about the things that Pitt did well this month and the things that were good for Pitt this month, the positives that come out of this month and this holiday season, I think that's a big one, is how they restocked the lines. I think they did a great job there. It's kudos to everybody involved, the recruiting staff, the assistant coaches, the head coach, all parties did a really good job restocking. One thing I haven't talked about as much, only just to mention it in passing for the low numbers, is the offensive skill guys in this recruiting class. Obviously, they brought in 2 transfers at the skill positions, the two guys from Western Carolina, Desmond Reed and Sincere Lee, and we'll see what those guys are able to do and how they can translate FCS to ACC. But the guys in the recruiting class, and I've talked about how there's only really 3 guys. There's a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver. And it's a small group, and we sort of just – I feel like most of my discussion of those guys or most of the mentions of those guys have been just saying that there were only 3 of them and moving on to talk about the linemen and the linebackers, which make up 13 out of the 19 recruits in the class. But I am really intrigued with this group. I think, number one, you got Juelz Golf, who is pronounced Juelz. Did I say golf? Did I do what Pat Narduzzi said? He said it during signing day. He called him Juelz Golf, but it's Juelz Goff from Central York. I don't think he could be. I mean, I think he's really, really good. And I've said this a lot of times that I think you can live with 3-star running backs. I think that's a position where obviously, I mean, the 4 and 5-star guys, that's where you're going to find most of the talent. Although for Pitt, we've seen them take multiple 4-star running backs and guys not pan out. But I think, 3-star, you can find a lot of very good 3-star running backs who can be successful in college if you have a good blocking, a good scheme, and good offensive line. And I think Juelz Goff comes in with a whole lot of pedigree and a great resume. He's the all-time leading rusher in Central York history. He was really good this season, and I think he rushed for 1,600 yards, something like that. He's an outstanding player. And he's enrolling at Pitt early. He's going to be in that running back mix. And Jim and I talked about this on the live stream on Thursday night, I think. That, you go into the running back room for this year and you've got Rodney Hammond, obviously. But then beyond that, coming back, you have Derek Davis as a redshirt junior who didn't really play last year. Montravius Lloyd, who's a redshirt freshman who didn't really play last year. And then you bring in Desmond Reed out of the transfer portal. And you don't know what you're going to get out of him. You might look at that and say, boy, that leaves a lot of question marks. I look at that and say, boy, it leaves the door open for Juelz Goff to step in. Freshmen play at running back probably more than any other position. I don't have any numbers to back that up, but anecdotally, doesn't it seem accurate? Freshmen play at running back more than any other position, and I think Goff is going to have a real chance to contribute with this running back room. So I'm really looking forward, and I think him coming in January, although it didn't help TJ Harvison last year, but Harvison had more veteran depth ahead of him. But I think Goff coming in January is going to help his case or help his cause of making a case for playing time in 2024. But then the other 2 offensive skill guys, Julian Duggar, the quarterback, and Cam Montero, the wide receiver, both sort of feel like lottery tickets a little bit to me because they're both really athletic. Montero doubled as a Wildcat quarterback and a wide receiver at different points in his career in Brockton High School in Massachusetts. And I think he shows a lot of athleticism in that way because he was able to catch passes and make plays in the passing game, but he was also able to run as a Wildcat quarterback and be elusive and get out and run, taking direct snaps. And so I think he's got a lot of potential in that regard. And then Julian Duggar, the more I look at him, the more I read about him, the more I just sort of think about what he did at Penn Hills. I think he's going to take some development. All right, I think there are a lot of raw tools there, and I don't mean that he's all raw, but I think he's developed a few things. I think he looks much better this year than he did a year ago. I saw him over the summer at a prospect camp, and he looked, 10 10 times more advanced and developed than he did a year previously. And so he's got a lot of physical tools, and it's just a question of developing them and how they'll grow and how he'll be coached and how they'll be developed. But boy, the tools are really, really enticing to me. He's one of these guys he's obviously really tall. And he's got long legs, so he's a very long strider. And a lot of times when you watch these long striding guys run, it doesn't feel like they're running as fast because they're taking fewer steps. I mean, some of the shorter guys, they're like, their legs are going, and so they look very, very fast. But those guys who cover like 3-4 yards with every step, it feels like, that is, it's a different kind of speed, but it's fast. And he's got like a 7-foot wingspan. He's got big hands. All those things you like to see in terms of physical tools. And I was watching a few clips that kind of popped up from this year. The last time I saw, I don't think he had released his senior highlight film yet. I wish he would, because I'd like to see his whole senior highlights. But just there's no question about the arm strength. He's got a big arm. He's got good accuracy. He can put the ball where it needs to be. But watching him break down and run when the play breaks down, or when it's a designed run or something like that, I mean, he's big and he can use that size to break tackles, but he can also get through some narrow spaces. He's got some elusiveness that allows him to run and extend runs and extend plays. I think our good friend Carlo Zavko, I think, said it best one time. He said, look, Julian Duggar's not Terrell Pryor. I'm not saying he's Terrell Pryor. I'm paraphrasing what Carlos said here, but he said Julian Duggar's not Terrell Pryor, and I'm not saying he's Terrell Pryor, but he does things that only Terrell Pryor could do. And the more I watch video of Julian Duggar, the more I think about it, and watch what he does, I see what he's talking about. He can make runs that, as a quarterback his size, there weren't many other guys who have been able to do it. It's Terrell Pryor, and again, I don't want to make that comparison. Right? It's unfair. It's unfair to make that comparison to Julian Duggar, to say, well, he's the next Terrell Pryor. I don't know about that. But what I do know is he's got a lot of physical tools to build from. And you'd much rather work with a guy, bring in a guy who's got all those physical tools you just need to develop, rather than bringing in a guy that maybe is limited athletically or doesn't have all those tools, and you're trying to develop an offense around what he's got, as opposed to you've got a lot more to work with. You've got a lot more to work with Julian Duggar, and it's pretty interesting to see. It's pretty exciting to see where he's going to end up in a few years, because I think the right coaching, the right development, he could be a pretty dynamic player, I think. But there's always an ongoing debate on the boards about what his potential really is, and I think he's got a lot of potential. It's going to be fun to watch. So we haven't talked about those three skill guys as much, other than just to mention that there's only three of them. Figure we should spend a little time, because I think they were good gets. I think they were good gets for Pitt. All right, tomorrow we're going to break down the scholarship board and see where Pitt stands, unless some major news comes out today or something. We'll break down the scholarship board and where Pitt stands with all the numbers and positions and everything like that, and then we'll have a live Panther-Lair show tomorrow night, right back at it. 8 p.m. Jim Hammett and me will be together. I think Jim will be here. You never know with Jim. He's all over the place. But 8 p.m., we will have a live stream. We take your comments and questions and talk about Pitt sports. So make sure you tune in for that. Stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com as well, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to never miss any of our Pitt sports coverage. And then, of course, like this video and subscribe, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you had a great holiday. Hope you enjoyed it. Safe and happy and healthy. It was nice and warm for the most part. So hopefully you enjoyed that as well. And now it's back to work here for the week until New Year's Eve. So hope you had a great weekend, hope you had a great holiday, and hope you have a great Tuesday ahead. We will talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.